recognize each other's voice. In case a tired lamb, half asleep in smothering dust, should fail to answer, its mother would come running back through a flock toward the spot where its last response was heard. It refused to be comforted until she found it. The one of 1,000. Though to our eyes and ears all seemed alike, the flock traveled at the rate of about a mile an hour, outspread in the form of an irregular triangle, about 100 yards wide at the base, and 150 yards long, with a crooked, ever-changing weight made up of the strongest foragers, called the leaders, which, with the most active of those scattered along the ragged side of the main body, hastily explored nooks in the rocks and bushes for grass and leaves. The lambs and feeble old mothers dawdling in the rear were called the tail end. About noon the heat was hard to bear. The poor sheep panted pitifully and tried to stop in the shade of every tree they came to, while we gazed with eager longing through the dim burying glare toward the snowy mountains and streams, though not one was in sight. The landscape is only wavering footholds grown here and there with bushes and trees and outcropping masses of slate. The trees, mostly the blue oak crystal lazy, are about 30 to 40 feet high, with pale blue-green leaves and white bark, sparsely planted on the thin soil or in crevices of rocks beyond the richer grass spires. The slates in many places rise abruptly through the tawny grass in sharp-like and carved slabs like tombstones in deserted burying grounds. With the exception of the oak and 4 or 5 species of Manzanita sinapis, the vegetation of the foothills is mostly the same as that of the plains. I saw this region in the early spring, where it was a charming landscape garden full of birds and beasts and flowers. Now the scorching weather makes everything dreary. The ground is full of cracks. Lizards glide about on the rocks, and ants in amazing numbers, whose tiny sparks of life only burn the brighter with the heat, barely quiver with unquenchable energy as they run long lines to fight and gather food. How it comes that they do not dry to a crisp in a few seconds exposure to such sun fire is marvelous. A few rattlesnakes lie coiled in out-of-the-way places. They are seldom seen. Magpies and crows, usually so noisy, are silent now, standing in mixed flocks on ground beneath the best shade trees, with bills wide open and wings drooped, too breathless to speak. The quails also are trying to keep in shade about the few tepid alkaline water holes. Cottontail rabbits are running from shade to shade among the ceanothus brush. And occasionally the long-eared hare is seen cambering gracefully across the wider openings. After a short noon rest in the grove, the poor dust-choked flock was to get driven ahead over the brushy hills. But the dim roadway had been falling, faded away just where it was most needed, compelling us to stop to look about us and get our bearings. The Chinamen seemed to think we were lost. Of Liddy's stick chaparral, while the Indians silently steer the billowy ridges and gulches for openings, pushing through the thorny jungle. We at length discovered a road trending toward Coulterville, which we followed until an hour before sunset, when we reached a dry ranch and camped for the night. Camping in the foothills with a flock of sheep is simple and easy, but far from pleasant. The sheep were allowed to pick what they could find in the neighborhood until after sunset, watched by the shepherd, while the others gathered wood, made a fire, cooked, unpacked and fed the horses, etc. About dusk, the weary sheep were gathered on the highest open spot near camp, where they willingly bunched close together, and after each mother had found her lamb and suckled it, All lay down and required no attention until morning. Supper was announced by the call. Rob, each with a tin plate, helped himself direct from the pots and pans while chatting about such camp studies as sheep feet, mines, coyotes, bears, or adventures during the memorable gold days of Pinder. The Indian kept in the background, saying never a word, as if he belonged to another species. The meal finished. The dogs were fed. The smokers smoked by the fire. And under the influences of fullness and tobacco, the calm that settled on their faces seemed almost divine. Something like the mellow meditative glow portrait on the countenances of saints. Then suddenly, as if awaking from a dream, each with a sigh or a grunt knocked the ashes out of his pipe, yawned, gazed at the fire a few moments, said, "Well, I believe I'll turn in," and straightway vanished beneath his blankets. The fire smoldered and flickered an hour or two longer. The stars shone brighter. Coons, coyotes, and owls stirred the silence here and there, while crickets and hylas made a cheerful, continuous music, so vague and full that it seemed a part of the very body of the night. The only discordance came from a snoring sleeper and the coughing sheep with dust in their throats. In the starlight, the flock looked like a big gray blanket. June 4! The camp was astir at daybreak. Coffee, bacon, and beans formed the breakfast, followed by quick dishwashing and packing. A general bleating began about sunrise. As soon as the mother ewe arose, her lamb came bounding and bunting for its breakfast. And after the 1,000 youngsters had been suckled, the flock began to nibble and spread. The restless withers with ravenous appetites were the first to move, but dared not go far from the main body. Lily and the Indian and the Chinaman kept them headed along the weary road, and allowed them to pick up what little they could find on a breadth of about a quarter of a mile. But as several flocks had already gone ahead of us, scarce a leaf, green or dry, the starving flock had to be hurried on over the bare, hot hills to the nearest of the green pastures, about 20 or 30 miles from here. But as several flocks had already gone ahead of us, scarce a leaf, green or dry, was left. Therefore the starving flock had to be hurried on over the bare, hot hills to the nearest of the green pastures, about 20 or 30 miles from here. The pack animals were led by Don Quixote, a heavy rifle over his shoulder intended for bears and wolves. This day has been as hot and dusty as the first, leading over gently sloping brown hills, with mostly the same vegetation, excepting the strange-looking Sabine pine Pinus sabiniana, which here forms small groves or is scattered among the blokes. The trunk divides at a height of 15 or 20 feet into 2 or more stems, outleaning or nearly upright, with many straggling branches and long gray needles, casting but little shade. In general appearance, this tree looks more like a palm than a pine. The cones are about 6 or 7 inches long, about 5 in diameter, very heavy, and last long after they fall, so that the ground beneath the trees is covered with them. They bake fine resiny, like giving campfires. Next to ears of Indian corn, the most beautiful fuel I've ever seen. The nuts, the Don tells me, are gathered in large quantities by the Digger Indians for food. They are about as large and hard-shelled as hazelnuts, food and fire fit for the gods from the same fruit. June 5! This morning, a few hours after setting out with the crawling sheep cloud, we gained the summit of the first well-defined bench on the mountain flank at Pino Blanco. The Sabine pines interest me greatly. They are so airy and strangely paw-like I was eager to sketch them, and was in a fever of excitement without accomplishing much. I managed to halt long enough, however, to make a tolerably fair sketch of Pio Blanco Peak from the southwest side, where there is a small field and vineyard irrigated by a stream that makes a pretty fall on its way down the gorge by the roadside. After gaining the open summit of this first bench, feeling the natural exhilaration due to the slight elevation of 1,000 feet or so, and the hopes excited concerning the outlook to be obtained, a magnificent section of the Merced Valley at what is called Horseshoe Bend came full in sight. A glorious wilderness that seemed to be calling with 1,000 songful voices. Bold, down-sweeping slopes, feathered with pines and clumps of manzanita with sunny, open spaces between them, make up most of the foreground. The middle and background present fold beyond fold of finely modeled hills and ridges rising into mountain-like masses in the distance, all covered with a shaggy growth of chaparral, mostly adenostoma, planted so marvelously close and even that it looks like soft, rich plush without a single tree or bare spot. As far as the eye can reach it extends, a heaving, swelling sea of green is regular and continuous as that produced by the heath of Scotland. The sculpture of the landscape is as striking in its main lines as in its lavish richness of detail. A great congregation of massive heights with the river shining between, each carved into smooth, graceful folds without leaving a single rocky angle exposed, as if the delicate fluting and ridging fashioned out of metamorphic slates had been carefully sandpapered. The whole landscape showed design, like man's noblest sculptures. How wonderful the power of its beauty! Stricken, I might have left everything for it. Glad, endless work would then be mine tracing the forces that have brought forth its features. Its rocks and plants and animals in glorious weather. Beauty beyond thought everywhere. Beneath, above, made and being made forever. I gazed and longed and admired until the dusty sheep and packs were far out of sight. Made hurried notes in a sketch, though there was no need of either. For the colors and lines and expression of this divine landscape countenance are so burned into mind and heart they surely can never grow dim. The evening of this charmed day is cool, calm, cloudless, and full of a kind of lightning I have never seen before. White glowing cloud-shaped masses down among the trees and bushes, like quick throbbing fireflies in the Wisconsin meadows rather than the so-called wildfire. The spreading hairs of the horses' tails and sparks from our blankets show how highly charged the air is. June 6th. We are now on what may be called the second bench or plateau of the range, after making many small ups and downs over belts of hill waves, with, of course, corresponding changes in the vegetation. In open spots, many of the lowland composita are still to be found, and some of the Mariposa tulips and other conspicuous members of the lily family. But the characteristic oak of the foothills is left below, and its place is taken by a fine large species Quercus californica with deeply low deciduous leaves, picturesquely divided trunk, and broad, massy, finely lobed and mottled head. Here also at a height of about 2,500 feet we come to the edge of the great coniferous forest, made up mostly of yellow pine with just a few sugar pines. We are now in the mountains and they are in us, kindling enthusiasm, making every nerve quiver, filling every pore and cell of us. Our flesh and bone tabernacle seems transparent as blasted the beauty about us, as if truly an inseparable part of it, thrilling with the air and trees, streams and rocks, in the waves of the sun, a part of all nature, neither old nor young, sick nor well, but immortal. Just now I can hardly conceive of any bodily condition dependent on food or breath any more than the ground or the sky. How glorious a conversion! So complete and wholesome it is. Scarce memory enough. oasis of life we seem to have been so always. Through a meadow opening in the pine woods, I see snowy peaks about the headwaters of the Merced of Yosemite. How near they seem and how clear their outlines on the blue air. Or rather at the blue air, for they seem to be saturated with it. How consuming strong the invitation they extend. Shall I be allowed to go to them? Night and day I'll pray that I may. But it seems too good to be true. Someone worthy will go, able for the godful work. As far as I can, I must drift about these love monument mountains. Glad to be a servant of servants in so holy a wilderness. Found a lovely lily, Calicortus albus, in a shady and nostma thicket near Coulterville. In company with 80 interim chilets. It is white with a faint purplish tinge inside at the base of the petals. A most impressive plant. Here is a snow crystal. One of the plant saints that all must love and be made so much the purer by it every time it is seen. It coats the roughest mountaineer on his good behavior. With this plant the whole world would seem rich though none other existed. It is not easy to keep on with the camp cloud while such plant people are standing preaching by the wayside. During the afternoon we passed a fine meadow bounded by stately pines. Mostly the arrowy yellow pine, with here and there a noble sugar pine. Its feathery arms outspread above the spires of its companion species in marked contrast. A glorious tree, its cones 15 to 20 inches long, swinging like tassels at the ends of the branches with superb ornamental effect. Saw some logs of this species at the Greeley Mill. They are round and regular as if turned in a lathe, excepting the cups, which have a few buttressing projections. The fragrance of the sugary sap is delicious and sets the mill and lumber yard. How beautiful the ground beneath this pine, thickly strewn with slender needles and grand cones, and the piles of cone scales, seed wings and shells around the instep of each tree where the squirrels have been feasting. They get the seeds by cutting off the scales at the base in regular order, following their spiral arrangement, and the seeds at the base of each scale, 100 or 2 in a cone, must make a good meal. The yellow pine cones and those of most other species and genera are held up